Welcome. Well, can I position myself over my face? No, I can't. I'm in this corner. I can. That's me. I'm Ernest, and I will be sharing today's session. I'll move back. Sorry about that. Go. So, I wanted to share a session on how we can learn from the people in our organization, and I'll be trying to summarize basically the last 5 years of Edurio research and highlight the things that we think are most relevant for trust leaders to pay attention to and learn from. There we go. This works as well. So a little bit about Edurio. Edurio is England's largest and leading stakeholder feedback solution specifically for school trusts. We now work with over 150 trusts with over 2,000 schools on gaining clarity around the things that matter. So we cover topics like staff well-being, safeguarding pupil well-being, parental experience. And so we try to work with the trusts who care about things broader than just the academic outcomes and support their school improvement priorities. Now, as part of our work, a very important part of our work is publishing research. And so here's a link where you can find any of the research reports that we publish. They're all available for free. They're based on England's largest data sets on whether that's staff experience or equality, diversity, inclusion, or other topics. And they're always there to highlight what's relevant for the sector right now and what influences the outcomes most important for the trusts that we work with. Now, as part of the work, and this influences somewhat the topics that I'm going to be sharing with you today, we work with the Confederation of School Trusts as their research partner. And last year, we collaborated on the National CST School Trust Report, where we surveyed 328 trusts representing over 2,300 schools. And we wanted to understand where you as trust leaders feel your priorities are right now. Now, we're going to be launching the next iteration of this work very soon, so I trust that many of you will participate in this as well this time. But the interesting element here is looking at the top 3 priorities for the board this year. Improving quality of education came first, which was viewed as a really favorable thing by the CST, because this solidifies, this shows and proves that trusts are not just there for operational efficiency, they're there and they see as their value to improve quality of education. Now, growth came second, showing that this is a priority for many trusts right now, and workforce development and people strategy came third, with half of the trusts showing that this is within their top 3 priorities. So with this in mind, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is going to highlight elements of growth, elements of quality of education, and workforce development and people strategy. And hopefully some of the lessons that I'm going to share are going to allow you to better structure your work and plan your work to address some of these priorities and challenges. So let's jump into it, and I'm going to share 5 lessons on operating an efficient trust. Now, I'm going to jump straight into that, and the first one, which I want to highlight, is making sure the role of the trust is crystal clear for everybody involved. Now, what do I mean by making sure the role of the trust is clear? We asked staff members, how confident are you that being part of the trust is beneficial? And we've been asking this, as many of our surveys, we've been asking this for years. And well, in this case, 2 years to be exact. And we looked at the pre-COVID, so what were people saying prior to COVID, and what are people saying during COVID? And we see that it's improved. So that's something to celebrate for us as a sector, that the role of the trust is clearer for people, so they feel more confident that being part of the trust is beneficial. So the green elements on this part are for people saying that they're completely confident. The red ones are those who are slightly or not confident at all. And even now, a quarter of the staff members are not very confident that being part of the trust is beneficial. And this matters. But what's also important and really encouraging is that here we look at all the trusts that have taken part in this particular survey, and we look at, okay, so for the trust, what proportion of your staff are confident that being part of the trust is beneficial? And we see on this side that in some trusts, 2/3 of staff members are confident that being part of the trust is beneficial, whereas in other trusts, only 14%. So 1 in 8 or 1 in 7 people say that they're confident that being part of the trust is beneficial. And there's nothing in particular about the trust structure or size that really drives this. And the important realization here is that the work that the trust does, the work that you do internally, really influences how confident staff members feel that being part of the trust is beneficial. And let's think a little bit about how we can improve that. And we looked at 3 things that trusts can work on. One is the question of whether school staff feel like they're part of the trust. And I know that many of trusts have very different approaches to this. Some trusts will say, okay, so for us, we're a support organization where we exist to help our schools, but we're not there to kind of bring everybody over as into the brand, and that's fine. But it is important for staff members to feel that they're part of an organization, to see the value in it. And so only less than 1/3 of the staff members feel that they are fully or to a great extent part of the trust. Now, the really interesting element here is looking at this across the roles. So leadership, 43% feel that they're part of the trust community. It's twice the number of teachers who would report that. And so as trusts, I know that we frequently work with the leadership teams in the school, and that's great. That is the natural way of working. But we need to look beyond those who we directly work with, and only if the general staff body, teachers, TAs, admin staff, feel confident that they are part of the trust community, will you be able to see a cohesive picture where everybody is aligned around the values of the trust, the vision of the trust, and want to be a part of it. Now, does this matter is a relevant question. Does it matter whether we feel we're part of the trust community? I'm going to move myself around so you can see the chart. Now, the research actually shows that it does matter. So under me, you can see probably one of the more complex parts of this presentation, where we looked at the question, how often have you considered resigning from your post? So in the staff experience survey, we ask everybody, in the last 3 months, how frequently did you consider resigning? And we see the green ones are never, rarely, and then yellows are sometimes, and then often and constantly. So was there a question? Okay, no. Okay, so you see that chart. Now, this particular chart looks at the correlation. So we asked the extent to which staff feel like part of the trust community. So the top bar is those respondents who feel fully part of the trust community. And we looked at their split of how many never thought about resigning, how many rarely, sometimes, often, constantly. On the very bottom, we see the respondents who did not feel part of the trust community at all. And we see the same split for them, what proportion of them responded about how they responded about considering resigning. And the interesting conclusion that we can take from this is that from those who don't feel part of the trust community at all, only a quarter are in the green, that they never or rarely have thought resigning in the last 3 months. Out of those who fully feel like part of the trust, 3/4, well, actually more than that, 86% say that they've never or rarely thought about resigning. So we see that this massively, massively matters. If the staff members feel like they're part of the trust community and know what the trust attempts to do for them, they're more than 3 times likely to not be thinking about resigning. So that's kind of the first element that trusts can take real action on. The second, and linked, is the element of trust culture. So to what extent do you think the trust values are embedded into the culture of your school? Here we see a more positive picture, actually, that 55% feel that the values of the trust are quite embedded in the school. And this is a challenge for many trusts, because when schools join, they will have their own culture. They will have their own value statements, their mission statements, and some of those will have been in action for decades, if not more. And so many trusts are rightfully thinking about how do we think about this alignment of the values of the trust and the school? Do we just say, okay, now you follow these 5 words, as opposed to the similar sounding words that you previously worked on, or do we align it in some way? And as you know, values, it's more important how they're lived rather than what the words on the wall are. So many different options can work. But again, we see that there is a direct link. So this is very similar to what we looked at before. There is direct link between whether we feel that values are fully embedded or not at all embedded. So if I feel that the values of the trust are fully embedded in my school, I am 80% likely to not be thinking about resigning, whereas I'm 24% likely if I don't feel that they're embedded. So again, about 3 times more likely to stay if you feel that the values of your trust are embedded in the school. And here again, we're looking at a distribution of the participating trusts, and we see that there's a massive variety. So about a quarter are in this 20 to 40% category. So 5% in 20 to 30% and 20% in 30 to 40. So this is where 40% or fewer staff members say that the values are embedded. And then you have a quarter in 40 to 50 and a quarter in 50 to 60. And another quarter in the 60 onwards. So you can actually have, and I'll remove myself from blocking the graph. You have very few trusts, but you can actually have trust where nearly every staff member feels confident that the trust values are fully embedded in the culture of the school. And this is something you need to consider as you plan your culture as an organization. And the third thing I wanted to highlight is the clarity of the division of responsibilities between your school and the trust. So do staff members actually understand what you are there to do as an organization? And we again see that about less than half say that it's very clear, quite clear. And I'll come back to the parent side, and this is something quite important for staff members, because as an organization, you can have various different approaches to how you work, but it's important that everybody is aligned with that and everybody is clear on what that is. And that's the least you can do, actually. You can just think about, okay, whether there's a chart of responsibilities, this is what the trust does, this is what the school does. Because there are so many different models in the sector, it is important to clarify so that your staff members and staff members from schools that are joining or perhaps being joining from another trust or in a merger of trusts are clear how your organizations work. Now, we've been talking a lot about the staff members, but let's look a little bit about the parent side. We also asked parents in the community, and this is from our parent experience survey, are you aware that your school is part of a multi-academy trust? And 84% say yes. So there is general awareness that the trust exists and does something. Now, however, same as last staff members, there's a large group of parents who are not clear what the role of the trust is. So 19%, so 1 in 5 parents say that they're not clear at all on what the role of the trust is. And so this is again a comms task where involving the parents as partners in the learning and making sure that you clarify for them what the role of the trust is something that is quite fundamental and quite basic as a first step in the direction of being a strong trust. And this is linked with the challenge that a large group of parents are not confident that being part of the trust is beneficial for pupils. Like with staff members, this is something that about a third are slightly or not confident at all. And this is something that you can work on by clarifying the responsibilities and the role of the trust and thinking about how you engage with the schools. So that's the first part and the longest part, I'm sure many of you would be pleased to hear, of the presentation. So making sure that the role of the trust is clear, the values are clear, and that staff members and parents feel part of the trust community. Now let's move on. And the second is talking about growth. You may remember I shared previously the chart of growth being priority for many trusts. And for many, frankly, it's a necessity. Many trusts have invested in school improvement teams, which are only viable if you grow as an organization and add more schools to spread the cost of that resource. Now, here we've put out some research recently on growth, and an important thing that we try to share and communicate is that growing with culture in mind is fundamental to your growth as an organization such that it is successful. And this is from the same research for the trust CEO research that we did with the Confederation of School Trusts, where we asked, okay, so on the x-axis you see whether, well, no, on the y-axis, let's start with that. On the y-axis you see whether whether the CEOs felt that a topic is a priority for them. And on the x-axis, you see whether they feel it's a challenge for them. So basically, what's really interesting here is that improving quality of education, you see here, you've got workforce development further there. Now, growth is all the way up there. So basically, it's a priority for a lot of trusts. And a lot of the trusts for whom it is a priority, they also expect it's going to be a major challenge. So 3/4, so 75% of those who said it's a priority have said that it's going to be a real challenge for them. So getting growth right is massively necessary in the sector right now. And in growing, culture matters. And I think I want to look at, we can look at the corporate world for some of the lessons here. Now, in the corporate world, mergers and acquisitions are a frequent activity of businesses. And one way to look at it is whether they deliver shareholder value. So essentially, do they increase the share price of the organization after the merger compared to, so are the shareholders of the two organizations better off now that the organizations are combined? And looking at this, KPMG, I think, found that 70 to 80% of mergers and acquisitions actually destroy shareholder value. So the shareholders are worse off after the mergers happen. And in education, you obviously don't care about shareholder value in the same way, but you care about the value for the organization. You care about the educational value of the merger. And so we can apply some of the same lessons. And one of the lessons that KPMG found in this massive research on publicly quoted companies is that when culture was considered as part of the merger acquisition process, the probability of improving shareholder value increased by over a quarter. So in the corporate world, we see that considering culture as you grow as an organization is critically important. Now, what does it mean to consider a culture? We recently published 2 resources done by our wonderful insights team around recruitment side. So when you grow as an organization in terms of adding people, but also a cultural due diligence playbook for school trusts. So this is for trusts in the merger or acquisition process, well, merger process for trusts, where you are either having schools join you or merging with another trust. We believe that there's a lot of focus on financial and legal due diligence, but we think a cultural due diligence should also be a critical part of the process. Now, if we start with the side of growing as an organization, we basically suggest following 4 steps, and you can read more about it in the reports. They're also available for free. But we think about these 4 steps as defining your culture, assessing the culture of the organization that you're thinking about joining, comparing them and understanding the fit and match, and then this shared journey beginning, basically establishing how you communicate about them and building that as a common thread as you start your journey together. This is something that we do a lot in Adurio as well. So here's an actual example from a poster for Adurio a few years back when we looked at open discussion, and that's a value that is really critical for us as an organization. We recruit for that. We think about that as a key element of how we work. And we ran a workshop internally where we looked at a set of values that the team highlighted, and we mapped that on how important it is for the team members versus how much they believe it's present at Adurio. And this one was where there was the highest clustering, and this has allowed us to define how we work internally, which has its pain points, it has its difficulties. It's not always easy being completely open about things, but it also influences what kind of people we look for. And if we were to join another organization or merge or acquire another organization, it would allow us to think about what's important for us. So this is an example where there's clear value that's not just defined from the center, but defined by the team itself, and we try to live it throughout. And so we believe every trust should aspire to define these for themselves, but not in a central top-down way, but to get the team involved within this activity. On the recruitment side, the story is very similar. It is understanding this people joining the organization with culture in mind matches these you need to look at these 4 stages of employer branding. How do you communicate about you as an employer, as an organization? How do you define the job description with your values in mind? How do you test for that in interviews? How do you onboard for that? So this is a self-fulfilling cycle. Once you embed culture within the recruitment side, that allows you to retain better, to grow better, to establish these working principles that the entire organization shares. You can see here a very similar approach to what I shared on the merger side. Again, looking at capturing your culture and defining how that can be expressed as behaviors, looks at the culture in your organization. And then in the recruitment side, it's about communicating about it and hiring for it. So again, something you can read more about it in the reports at your own time. But as you grow, whether as an organization internally by hiring people or joining with an organization or having schools join, think about culture, the research shows that this is clearly a very, very important step and is a challenge for many of the trusts. So the third one is actually interesting, and is somewhat a challenging thought to grasp, is making sure your people are listened to and know it is a critical path of critical element of importance for staff well-being and well-being of other stakeholders. And I frequently get asked to speak about topics of school improvement, improving staff well-being, and there's questions. Can you share some tips on what we as schools or trusts can do to improve staff well-being and make sure that everybody's happy and never leaves? And there is a kind of an unfortunate side, which is there are no easy ways to fix it. So nothing you do matters, but the culture that you build, the culture that you establish really matters. And making sure your people are and feel listened to is a key element of building this culture of staff well-being. A few years ago, we ran this was one of our first major national surveys on staff well-being, staff experience, where we looked at the working conditions on the top side. So very practical things like workload, career development, professional support available, but we also looked at the relationships in the organization. So the relationship that staff members had with each other, the leadership dynamics, so the collaboration between the staff and the leadership team, and then the student behavior. So what's the relationship between the staff and the students in the school? And this was a major study. We now have over 40,000 staff members every year doing surveys. So the sample keeps growing and growing. And we looked at these 6 themes, these 6 modules. And the thing that had the clearest correlation with staff retention, so whether staff are thinking about resigning, similar to what we spoke about earlier, is this element of leadership dynamics. So those who are positive about leadership dynamics are 7 times less likely, to be thinking about resigning than those who are the most negative group about leadership dynamics. Now, what does that actually mean? What is this fancy management speak of leadership dynamics? Actually, essentially, it looks at, so here, all the questions that we asked about the theme of leadership dynamics. So it's about the things like openness and things like the whether staff feel consulted and whether staff members feel that they're kind of respected and valued and fairly treated. And so that's what leadership dynamics consists of. It's essentially the collaboration that staff members have with the school leadership team. Now, if this is basically just a graph of saying across all these 8 themes, what proportion were low responses and what proportion, so the green ones were the positive ones. And we can look at feeling of being respected and fairly treated and appreciated are in the really positive end. So the vast majority of staff members feel that they're valued, respected, and treated fairly. So there's this relationship aspect of leadership dynamics is a really positive one. However, if we look at impact of feedback to leadership, so do I believe that my feedback matters? Do I believe I'm consulted before making decisions, before decisions are made that influence me? Do I believe that leadership understand my professional challenges? This is a much more negative response. And the third one is interesting. So am I confident that my leadership team understands my challenge? We need to remember that most school leaders are actually staff members themselves. They've been teachers, TAs, or admin staff in the school. And so for a majority of staff members not feeling like they're being understood, it's a challenge. And this is something that professionally we can say, okay, well, I actually know this. I know what my staff members are going through, etc. But if you don't give them full confidence that they've been heard and that they've been understood and they've been listened to, you're going to have this picture where this is in the red and this influences staff members' feeling of thinking about resigning. As trusts, we also see that many staff members report that it's difficult to voice work-related concerns to the trust. A trust is a single employer, so it is staff members are first and foremost, theoretically, members of the trust. The trust is the legal employer, and so the fact that a quarter of staff members say that it's difficult or very difficult, and it's actually similar to the proportion and higher than the proportion of staff members who say it's very or quite easy, shows that much more can be done to create this clear structure of ensuring that staff members feel understood and heard. Many staff members also report that they don't feel that leadership actively work to address the professional needs of the staff. And this is also one where the parents share some quite similar characteristics. So we correlated parental engagement with how often the parents feel their feedback has an impact. And for those who say, my feedback always has impact, 97% of them feel engaged, as opposed to 10% who feel that their feedback doesn't matter. So it is not just the task of you to say, give me some feedback, I'm going to listen to it and do something about it. You need to give them the confidence that you've actually heard and understood them. And here we see the challenge from a parent's perspective. They feel that their feedback just doesn't have impact. Quite a lot of them do. And this is actually interesting. This is from our local governing body survey. So when we've looked at local governing body efficiency, we asked the governing teams, how well do you know the needs of the parents at this school? And actually, only about half said that they feel they understand the needs of the parents very or quite well. And so as the governing body is part of their responsibility is engaging with the community and knowing the needs of the community. This shows that the parents are not wrong to feel that they're not being heard or understood. So there's a big challenge of communication within the organization. And so that's the third lesson in research is everything that we've done shows that people care about being listened to and heard and understood. And it is your responsibility to put in the effort to give them the confidence rather than just collecting feedback. You also need to get back to them and talk about how that's been useful and repeat to them what you've understood. The fourth one is an interesting highlight based on research that we've done very recently. So working on safeguarding proactively to ensure quality of education. So the biggest priority that trusts told us they have is in the CEO survey was that education quality. And within that, we understandably focus on the academic outcomes and thinking about the grades and all that. But safeguarding matters so much to be able to think about education quality that we would call on trusts to think more proactively around their safeguarding approach. So this is another one of those correlation graphs. If you can deal with a few more of those. So we asked, this is from the pupil well-being report research that we've done. We asked, how able are you to feel? How able do you feel to learn and understand new things? So how able to learn are you? And we correlated that against safety in the classroom. So do you feel safe in the classroom? And look at this difference. So from the pupils who felt very safe or quite safe, 3/4 felt able to learn and understand new things. And this compares to about 1/3 of the pupils if they didn't feel safe or not safe at all. So you can think a lot about curriculum around how you structure your learning, but if the pupils don't feel safe, they're not in a place where they're able to consume that, where they're able to learn. So this needs to be a massive priority in a very proactive way. Now, you may have seen this in the Guardian recently, and we asked pupils, have you missed any school because you feel unsafe in the last 6 months? And a very worrying 10% said that yes, I have actually missed the school. So this is from a research report that we published in collaboration with the Key, where they also shared some really insightful suggestions on solving some of these challenges. So feel free to download that and have a read yourself. Now, this is understandably, and this won't be a surprise to many of you, this is a bigger challenge in secondary school, in particular from year 8 to 11. But all schools have this as a challenge. So all schools have pupils who feel that they haven't felt very safe in school lately. And this is where the proactive word comes from. So this is why we believe you need to be proactive in thinking about safeguarding. So we asked pupils, if you ever felt unsafe, would you ask adults at school for help? And 61% said, yes, I would. So happy days. We're capturing the vast majority of those who would feel unsafe, is what we would think. However, we also asked those pupils who reported having felt unsafe, we asked, did you actually talk to an adult? And look at this, only a quarter said that they've spoken to an adult at school. And about 45% had spoken to an adult outside of school. So if the majority of pupils say they would speak, but actually only a quarter say they did speak, how much of the safeguarding challenges in the school are flying under our radar? So you know that all this work that your staff are doing to record safety incidents, etc., a lot of this might not come to their awareness because the vast majority of pupils haven't felt comfortable to actually share situations where they felt unsafe. They've told us this is because they feel ashamed, or they're scared, aren't sure what to do, or just feel like they should be able to sort this out themselves. So in order to think about safeguarding, you need to think about safeguarding proactively, and communicate and make sure that you understand the picture from the pupils' perspectives. So that's this idea of working safeguarding. So one of the things that we do is obviously any trust is welcome to participate in the safeguarding research, where we try to establish the general situation within your school and trust and match that against the national benchmark. We also recommend trusts to think about how you work with the pupils themselves to think about safeguarding, because we train the adults in the school to address safeguarding concerns. And actually, from the research that we did on pupil well-being, many pupils choose to speak to their friends more so than adults at school. So are we training them? Are we giving them the tools to support each other? So working on safeguarding proactively is a necessary step to ensuring quality of education. And the final topic, and a relatively short one you'll be pleased to hear, is aligning governance across the trust. So many trusts, these are some charts from the CST survey. Many trusts are now regularly undertaking reviews of governance. So over half have done one in the last 3 years and in the last year, and actually over half are currently in an external review of governance or plan to be within the next year. And as many trusts are growing, the regional directors are asking a recent review of the governance as a key part to enable growth, right? So you need to be looking at your governance practices almost on an annual basis if it's there to support your growth plans and the growth process that you have as a trust. Now, that's one part of the challenge. So there's this constant cycle of thinking about governance. the other thing that CEOs have told us is that it's really difficult to hire for the roles that you have. So over half of trustee boards have vacancies. We have challenges at the local governance level. Central governance support teams have vacancies. And if you look on the right-hand side, where we asked how easy or difficult do you anticipate it'll be to fill the roles on your trustee board, I'm going to get out of the way. You see that the vast majority, this is one of a very, very visible thing, say that it's going to be very or quite difficult to hire for the governance roles. And looking at the feedback from the local governing bodies, we saw that the majority feel that there's good collaboration between the school and the trust. So that's positive. I think there's a however coming. However, let's think about the vision question we had early on, which is how clear is the vision of the organization? So look at this on the left-hand side. We say, how clear to you is the school vision? And here we have only 2% who say that it's not very clear. And on the right-hand side, we ask, how clear is the vision of the multi-academy trust? And here we see about half really positive compared to 85% about the school vision. So local governing bodies, I know that for many schools, this is a recent shift for them having joined the trust, so they're still trying to get to grips with it. But local governing bodies are representatives of the trust in theory, but many are still feeling more aligned with the school vision and values, as opposed to having clear alignment with the trust vision. So this is something that you can work on and think about how the local governing bodies feel like part of the organization. And one of the most negative responses is how well do you actually know the central trust team as a local governing body? Less than a third say that they know them well. More positive on the right-hand side is that there is a feeling that the central team knows your school. That's a positive. But again, do they have enough of the tools to connect the school and the trust? And another one, which is a real challenge, as reported by the local governing bodies, is how often do you hear examples of good practice of governance from other schools of this trust? One of the reasons why trust works together is to share good practice. However, it doesn't appear that the governing bodies feel fully embedded. So the average, less than 1 in 5 local governing body members say that they often hear examples of good practice from other schools of this trust. So clearly a priority that trust can work on. So that's the final thought around aligning governance across the trust. Think about the local governing bodies. Think about how they can represent the trust values, the trust vision in your school. So here are the 5 things. I'll disappear again to the right. Think about the role of the trust, clarify that, think about the culture as you grow, make sure that your people are listened to, and then work on safeguarding and think about the governance. I know this is a mix of things covering quite a broad base, but each of these things, if you set that as a priority, if you think about embedding this within your organization, we're confident that this will improve your staff retention, parental engagement, as well as pupil well-being and ability to learn. As always, you're welcome to view any of the research reports that are published here at the Insights tab. And that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I will happily take any questions now. So thank you very much.